Rick Pitino, one of the esteemed coaches in the history of college basketball. I mean, look at this guy. He goes to Iona, fucking Iona, and puts them on the map. I proudly wear my Iona shirt that Leslie Visser gave us.
Wear it all the time.
Around town, and people go,
The fuck's Iona?
Iona. Go there. Anyway, so he does real well there. He goes to St. John's. Not an easy spot. You have Connecticut is dominating college basketball for the last couple of years. Now, naturally, you would think that you could justify some kind of drop-off. I don't know that you can condemn Danny Hurley, although I enjoy watching Danny Hurley in agony almost as much as I enjoy watching Jerry Jones after a pick six when they cut the shot of him in the skybox, and he's got his son there, and he looks over and says, "Who put this fucking team together?" Look at Jerry.
You asshole.
I mean, if Doge was looking into the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry would be gone, although he would be catching a tremendous tax break, no doubt. Maybe it wouldn't be surprised if he became an advisor to the Trump administration.
Problem with Hurley, like falling off is fine. I mean, 18 record, especially when you're back to back. He's such a jerk off. Like,
unglued.
Like, I don't know if he's number 2 in sports, but you're not wrong. Like watching him just lose it. Now that they're not good, and he's turned down 2 massive jobs, and he's watching it dwindle away. He's a little baby.
It's exacerbated this particular characteristic of Danny Hurley, which is not a flattering one. I mean, you look like a Kim Mulkey type of asshole when you're this demonstrative and then always complaining and never really acknowledging that the other team just happens to be really good.
The time. Wake up with Defo, joined by Lubie. Welcome to the Defo Show.
Very pleasant. Good morning, everybody. Great to be with you here at the Defo Show on a Tuesday morning. I'm Jeff DeForest, the handsome guy over there. The young guy is one Mike Lubitz, and always good to see Lubie. I had a rough day yesterday, Lubie. I don't like to complain about personal things that are sort of impeding you to enjoy your life, but I had some kind of foot issue yesterday. I was on more painkillers yesterday than the English patient.
Oh, geez.
Oh, my God, I couldn't take a step out of bed. It was absolutely crazy. Now, that happened to me once before, a long time ago. It was more of a heel thing. I don't know if you've ever had plantar fasciitis. As they call it.
Heard it's
I always
ridiculous.
thought it was fasciitis, but I guess it's fasciitis. Common injury. NBA players experience it a lot because they're constantly jumping up and down, and it impacts the heel area. You can get it in a variety of fashions. It could also... I don't mean this in any disparaging way because both Lubie and I are Jewish. So if you are Jewish, don't take offense to this. But it's relatable to a syndrome that I call Jew feet, where we are generally a flat-footed group of people, very flat-footed, arch, and that can have a tendency to lead you to incur plantar fasciitis. Now, when you hear a basketball player is out because of plantar fasciitis, you don't see this injury. It's a tissue injury. And believe me, I don't know how anybody ever played. Now, you can get juiced with a shot of cortisone. I remember, speaking of the heat, the guy that originally gave me a diagnosis of this and was going to treat it for me eventually sent me to physical therapy, instead of the alternative at the time, which was not a pleasant one. There was a time when getting a cortisone shot was something that you absolutely you thought that you were in The Marathon Man, and you were about to see the dentist in that movie. I don't know if you remember that flick. Probably a little before your time. Dustin Hoffman in The Marathon Man.
I've seen parts of it, and I've definitely heard of it. I
Being
know
tortured by an evil German dentist. What was the deal there? And at that time, I mean, this has to go back into maybe the early 90s. Were we that primitive back then? Because when I finally received my first ever cortisone shot, it was for a knee situation that I had, and it was nothing. They do this freezing technique now, Lubie, where have you ever had a cortisone injection? And they they freeze the area as they're administering the injection. And what's funny is I was in mortal fear of this because of Dr. Harlan Selznick, who has a very, very gentle bedside manner. Selznick is not one of those guys that you're thinking, you're a butcher.
I hope not. I mean, he's a legend.
I was trying to preserve my participation in what was known as the Alzheimer's Cup then, where I was playing the great Eddie Kaplan. We played tennis a couple of times a week, and I ended up getting plantar fasciitis. It can happen because one of this causes is if all of a sudden you're walking barefoot on tile floors. I just moved into a new house. The old Defo mansion had a bunch of tile floors. I always walk barefoot. I don't see any reason to put shoes on, slippers, or anything else. Are you going to cut those toenails? Or are you just going to leave filth all over the house? How on top of you is Shirley on these kind of things? Does she give you shit all the time, Lubie, about things that you're doing? Because you're pretty conscientious about trying to do the right thing. I would have to say that about you is an absolute truth. You might be a little sloppy at times, I'm sure. I mean, when your eating habits used to be a little bizarre, but they've cleaned up substantially. In fact, I mean, you pale in comparison to Mayo now. You're almost like Emily Post when it comes to etiquette.
He's gross. Shirley's not on me about shoes or anything like that, but my eating, like I don't do it anymore. But the licking of the fingers, it was just my family still does it, and now it grosses me out, which is annoying because she's like indoctrinated me. But just habits, like stuff guys will do when they're alone in a home. Like you're big picking the nose. I try it. I don't try not to do it in public. I know it's gross, but like I'll be at my home and I'll be like itching my nose in my home, and she's like, "Go to the bathroom," and I'm like,
"Oh yeah, I love that."
I'm like, go to another room. Like, it's like, oh my God, like I'm not even, I'm not digging. I'm not a 4-year-old. It's just, there's something right here. Like, so yes, she's on me. She's my wife. So it's something that is just ingrained in them to be on us, no matter what we do.
No matter what. Doesn't matter what you do.
I'm doing the right shit.
You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Right? You put the dishes in the dishwasher, as is the new request. The new MO for the Mustang doesn't like to leave dishes in the rack in the sink, even if you've washed them already. Put them in the dishwasher. And then when you put them in the dishwasher, she either implies that you loaded them incorrectly, or that you're putting them in the dishwasher where there are already clean dishes still in there. It's like, well, how the fuck do I know if you wash these?
Shirley's not that. Shirley's the opposite. Shirley doesn't do anything with dishes, so she just doesn't know. So I'm the one. I don't act, but again, I'm my husband, so I'm not like scolding her because that would just end in a fight.
We're going to give you immunity on anything you say on the show, which I think all announcers should give when talking about women in their lives.
She knows all this. No, when you're together this long, like she knows how I feel. She knows how I feel. She doesn't give a shit how we feel.
Don't make me laugh because I go through this every day. Anyway, so I've had that, and that's one of those things that when you get it, it's kind of like the gout a little bit, where literally that first step out of bed is almost torture, or out of a chair. And this wasn't plantar fasciitis unless it takes on other forms, but whatever the hell it was, it's the line out of the Albert Castiglia song. Call a doctor, call a nurse. I don't know what it is, but I know that it hurts. Mm-hmm. I was actually on the phone because I was supposed to play tennis last night with the great Dr. Jerry, who's a podiatrist, and I tried to describe this shit to him. Here's a guy. You're on the phone with a doctor who's an expert in this field, and I couldn't figure out how to tell him what the fuck I was. Unbelievable. But so I'm swallowing, I'm gargling ibuprofen and Oxycontin and anything I could get my hands on. And somehow, miraculously, late at night, after a day of complete torture, it began to ease off. Is there anything better than to dissipate? It's like, I'm sure you've been hitting the balls at some point in time playing sports. Yes. I'll never forget that when the former Knicks coach, Dick McGuire, elbowed me in the balls as I was inbounding the ball in a half-court game. That was the infamous half-court games where it was Dick McGuire, Eddie Malloy, and Dr. J, a young Dr. J, against anybody and all comers. And I always loved that, where you knew that if you lost the game, which you were going to lose. I mean,
never play again.
16-year-old Dr. J. We didn't know he was Dr. J then. We just knew he was Julius Erving, and we knew that he was very good. And he had. It's funny too, Lou, because the evolution of Dr. J. You would have never known that he was going to become this flamboyant, artistic Connie Hawkins type of high-flying, high-wire act from playing those half-court games when he was 16 years old. But if you've ever been hitting the balls, I had it happen to me when I was a catcher. That was one of the things that convinced me I would rather play any other position. Because I idolized Yogi Berra as a kid. He was my favorite Yankee. I loved the Yogi. Mm-hmm. And so when I finally got into some kind of organized ball after my family moved from Brooklyn to Long Island, and you're thinking, wow, we're playing on like lined fields with base paths and equipment. This is great. So I get behind a plate, and I had clearly no experience because we didn't play any organized ball in Brooklyn, New York. You were playing punch ball, stick ball, every hybrid version of baseball that you could play, but you never actually played baseball, which was a weird thing. We had gloves, though. We did have gloves, but it was weird. I had an old Willie Mays mitt that I used forever. I'm very reluctant to change equipment. I was still using the Jimmy Connors T2000 after they had already come out with these, fiberglass and what is it? What's the what's titanium? They came out with the titanium rackets. I don't know. Do you ever use like a wood racket, Lubie, playing tennis? No.
Oh, yeah, my parents. When I was growing up, my parents had them. It was the stupidest, like
wood racket, and they would warp, and then you had to have them in that bracket, like you were Vinny Pazienza after he had the car accident, and you had the halo on your head.
Yeah.
And you screwed the fucking thing in there, and you're thinking, "There's something wrong with this." How did Bjorn Borg and all of those guys? How were they so great playing with wood rackets?
Well, you notice they didn't have strong serves, though, right? Like
the game was so slow compared to
becoming a big deal. And again, I'm sure what Pete Sampras played with is not what we have now. Mark Philippoussis, Ivanisevic, but
equipment had started to change, I believe, before Sampras.
Really I don't know how good your serve was going to be with one of because that was a problem. It was a much more soft game. A lot at the net. It wasn't as baseline driven. Like those rackets.
No, you can fire howitzers. Yeah,
it was hard to hit the shit out of a ball. You would, whoa, and it would go.
It had no flexibility, no give, no nothing, right? I mean, when you use these new rackets now, you can almost feel sometimes, if you're playing the game at a decent level, which I'm not consistent enough to have this happen all the time, but every now and then you would get into a groove, or when you hit the shot, it literally felt like you could almost feel the strings like a bow and arrow going back and whoosh, flying off there. It's one of the great things about playing sports. So when you, and this is in honor of the passing of the great Roberta Flack, who checked out yesterday, again, another obituary on the show, Libby. 88 years old, Roberta Flack. Were you familiar with the Roberta Flack?
Yes.
Killing Me Softly was her big song, but she had a song or an extrapolation, a version of the song, Trying to Get That Feeling Again.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was one of her originals.
I've
heard various versions of it. One of the great versions of it is by a flautist named Hubert Laws, who had a great version of Trying to Get That Feeling Again. And that line always sticks with me, because what are we trying to do in life, Lubie? It seems like always we're searching for that same thing, like after that first hit of cocaine, the first bump, and you spend the rest of the next 2 days, 48 hours, trying to get that feeling again. So we know what it's all about. But yeah, I mean, you didn't have that kind of feel for things when you had the old equipment. My Willie Mays mitt, I was so reluctant to part with it that it was one of those deals. And people used to do this back in the 60s, maybe late 50s. And did you ever see? There were two things that guys used to carry in their back pocket. One was an old baseball glove for some reason, even though there was no game going on and you weren't about to get into one. And it was one of those old gloves where the fingers weren't tied together. One of those things that maybe Mel Ott was making a couple of catches with this glove. And the other thing you used to have in the back pocket was a racing form. We don't do that anymore, right? What happened? The good times are gone, man. Right now we're voting with Putin and Kim Jong-un. That was a bit of a disgrace yesterday. I don't care who you are. When the U.S. is lining up with Russia against the rest of the world.
Russia, North Korea, and Belarus.
Excuse me, Donald.
And us. And that was it. I was like, dude,
what the hell is that? I mean, if that wasn't an eye-opener for you MAGAs out there.
Well, that's it's when we fight with the MAGA people, and it's like, dude, look around at who's voting with you. Like, all the people in the hate, no, I'm talking about in America, like all the people in all the hate groups are cheering at the same rally. Like, hello.
Unbelievable. So anyway, I mean, it was a rough day for me yesterday. A lot of painkillers, and it seemed to resolve the problem. But what I was getting into about getting hit in the balls, there was no better feeling than when that pain would start to dissipate finally.
Yep.
I mean, the easing off, it's applicable to anything, whether you're sick with a cold, at COVID, or whatever it is. When it finally starts to dissipate, don't you feel great, Lubie? And that's kind of what happened to me late last night. It started to dissipate, still wasn't 100%. And yet it was very much like that recovery. I remember getting nipped. You used to wear a cup. Did you ever wear a cup? Any sports that you played?
I never wore a cup. I always was curious about that.
It was a very good idea if you were behind the plate.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good.
Because you were going to get hit in the balls at some point in time. It was one thing when Steve Yeager came out with the thing so he wouldn't get hit in the throat. Remember, he got a bat stuck in his throat. The broken bat went back and a piece caught him. And then he was wearing this weird thing that hung down. And then all catchers started wearing it. Very much like we were talking about the other day with Red Berenson and the helmet. and I was watching a clip from the NHL that wasn't really that old. It wasn't that far back in the distant past. And the guys, I mean, like in the 80s, were players, most of the players not wearing helmets. We would have never known about Derek Sanderson with the Boston Bruins with the hair if all those guys were wearing helmets back then. How the hell did they play that game without helmets and goalies played without masks?
I don't know. I know McTavish was like that last dude into like the 90s. But I remember growing up my whole life into even the 80s, people wore helmets. So I guess there was more that, because I guess that they started at a certain time and they grandfathered people in where you had to have it. But I thought that was by the 80s. Like I know he played into the 90s and was like the one holdout, like a weirdo. But like the majority, if not all of everyone else was wearing it by then, I thought.
It's one thing. I mean, they have your teeth knocked out and be the team dentist for the Boston Bruins or one of these NHL teams, but to have no helmet, and then all you have to do if you want to know the need for the goalies to wear masks and how this didn't arise as a permanent condition for all goalies in the NHL earlier is take a look. Google Terry Sawchuk.
Yeah,
Google Terry Sawchuk and take a look at this picture.
You have like a tooth.
No, the scars are. I mean, you would have thought that this guy had to run into Leatherface or something. All right. So anyway, that's my health update there. The pain finally dissipated. I don't know if it's going to return, but let's hope that doesn't happen because that was absolute agony yesterday. All right. Many things happening on the sporting front. One of my favorite terms is the premature evaluation. So I'm on with the Greek yesterday, as his radio show still going at 2:00 every afternoon. He has me on every week or so. And he wanted to talk about Rick Pitino because, of course, he was as enamored with Pitino as we became after he was in on that interview we did with Pitino when Pitino drove himself to our studio at 940 Wins.
Yep.
Was that another thing that we did? Was greatly underappreciated by radio management? You've got one of the legendary coaches of all time, still very viable. And he's got a book out, and he drives himself to the studio and does a 1-hour sit-down interview with us.
Yeah, he was doing all
that. So he felt, closeness to Pitino just like we did. I mean, you couldn't help but appreciate the guy after just a great, you know how these college basketball coaches are. You became as enamored with them as I have been when we went to the Radio Row in the Final Four in Houston. And it didn't matter who they were. It could have been the guy that was coaching Florida Gulf Coast, who ended up going to USC. Is he still at USC, that guy?
I feel like he is.
I think he is. I think he's still there. Became a real hot commodity when Florida Gulf Coast was winning game after game after game after game and made that run. I always loved the Cinderella run in the NCAA tournament. There, Shaka Smart had one of those runs and became a very prominent coach. Pitino, Billy Donovan. I mean, all of these guys at some point in time. Our own dear friend Jim Larinaga, giant couple of runs in the NCAA tournament, including his latest one with Miami, which, by the way, they named a new coach. So how do you pronounce this guy's first name? Is it Jai? The son of John Lucas, Jai Lucas.
Jai Lucas.
He was an assistant with John Shire at Duke. Duke, now the number 2 team in the country, Lubie. Leapfrogging your Florida Gators. And now number 2 in the rankings. But the Greek yesterday is asking me about Pitino and this big win they had over UConn. UConn not very good this year, so I'm not sure how significant it is. And he's asking me if I got down yet at 30-1, which they were yesterday, at 30-1 on the St. John's Red Storm to win it all, Lubie.
That guy, by the way, Enfield is not the coach anymore. It's Eric, and this guy's coach. Was he at Arkansas? I think he coached in the NBA too. Eric Musselman. I know that.
Okay, he's been around
forever. I think he was the guy that brought Arkansas back.
What happened to Enfield? Is he still coaching?
He's not there.
He had a great story. I mean, the guy had a great story, didn't he? Where he took his wife.
He's coaching SMU.
Okay, his wife, a smoking hot babe, and he met her, and he was so immersed in coaching basketball that he took her to a Taco Bell on their first date.
And she was like a model, right? Isn't she like rich or something?
An absolutely gorgeous creature, no question about it. And it was a very heartening story, right? Takes Florida Gulf Coast, gets a bunch of guys from Latvia and all over the world, and very Pitino-esque, and forms a team that ends up rattling off a ton of victories in succession, and then goes on into the NCAA tournament. What would they make? Did they make it to the
16s at least? I don't know if they got farther than the 16s, but I think they got to the 16s.
with some really monumental victories, though.
Yeah.
They were pulling off
They
improbable.
were like a 15 or some crazy shit, and they won 2 games. It was like a big deal. They stole the first weekend.
So the Greek, who said he had already put a little taste on St. John's before this big victory over UConn and a couple of other wins that they had, they did sustain a loss. What did they lose to Vanderbilt? Is that who they lost to?
No, they lost to Villanova, St. John's. They lost to Villanova. Like we talked about, they were like 12 and they're like 15 and 12. They're like horrible, and that's I guess the game he fucking lost his mind. Since then, they're just obliterating,
blowing people out. But you see them as a championship team. I mean, as much as I would be rooting for that circumstance to come about, I'm not sure. I haven't. I've seen St. John's a few times in bits and pieces and segments of games, and I'm always interested in what Pitino's doing. And I love St. John's. I always had an affinity for the St. John's program. I grew up in New York. St. John's was we weren't big college basketball fans in New York City when I was a kid growing up. In fact, when I was growing up in Brooklyn, we didn't even play basketball.
I was gonna say, wasn't it like, and football existed, but it wasn't a big deal. It was just baseball or bust, right? Like the other stuff was just sort of there.
Long Island, when we moved to Long Island, basketball was extremely prominent, and that's kind of when I started to transition. But there I go again, using the word. Sorry, Ron. Transition into being more of a inclined to, well, it was easier to get a basketball game together. You only needed 2 guys.
Yeah.
One baseball. What are you going to do? You need like 14 guys. And,
baseball's hard.
Yeah, so it's hard to get a game together. Although we had plenty of people that wanted to play. Where we were constantly involved in some kind of baseball related activity, growing up in the city. Once you got to Long Island, there were plenty of parks out there with backboards with no double rims. They didn't have the stupid half moon. Is that the worst backboard that you ever played on? The half moon backboard? Who could shoot on a double rim with a chain net?
Hate it.
Yeah, and a half moon backboard that rattled when you hit the backboard. It was like you do Sam Jones, and boom, the whole backboard's shaking. Like
you just couldn't use the backboard. Like the backboard was there for show. The backboard was not helping you. You would shoot it off the backboard and it would bounce to the other end of the fucking court. Like the backboard was the most useless. And then the double rim had no give.
Double rim, forget about it.
I hate that.
There was nothing worse. The Marquis de Sade invented the double rim and put it up in parks just because they wanted kids to hate themselves.
100%.
But is it a premature evaluation to sense that do you see that? I mean, do you see Pitino cutting down the nets after the NCAA tournament?
I don't know.
That's a hard one for me to envision. As much as they're in the top 10, Louis, but
they're a top 8 team, top 9 team right now. Yeah. I don't know. The SEC is weird to me because you have all these teams that are really good. So where does St. John's fit in with that? And Duke is hung around with probably the player of the year in Cooper Flagg. Houston is good again, and we know they can shoot. And Andy's saying that St. John's actually plays really good old school defense.
Big win last night for Houston over Texas Tech.
But can they shoot? And that if you're playing like a Houston always shoots really well. So I don't know. It seems pretty wide open. There's not like a dominant team. I'm curious what happens with the SEC, to be brutally honest. Like I didn't realize A&M was good too. So like they have like 5 or 6 like top 10 teams. Like it's fucking weird. And I will see what comes out of that. I mean, maybe they'll beat each other up the rest of the season in the SEC tournament. Like the Big East isn't anything special. So St. John's should have a cakewalk, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be good. Like a lot of the time it's a battle test of teams that do make it through the tournament. So look, he's a guy that's won a lot, and I always trust coaches when it comes to the tournament. The top-notch coaches, a lot of the time, know how. Look at Tom Izzo. Tom Izzo's had his best years when teams were Look with Boeheim, as much as we gave him shit, he would have these random-ass teams, and he would take them really far. Like the guys that know how to win in the tournament, veteran guards, veterans just period, and coaches do matter in a tournament. And Rick Pitino is a guy that has a lot to prove. Like the Louisville thing ended so badly, and he's now done stuff at Iona. St. John's, where no one had won in 30 fucking years. He's within 2 years, he has him as a prominent team. So I wouldn't put it past him. I just don't know, like, if he has star power. And again, in the tournament, a lot of the time, like we've talked about, the talent, eventually, you have upsets. And we even see them get to the 4s. But eventually, like we saw with FAU, and like the cream finds its fucking way. And I don't know if St. John's going to be able to match up if they face a Duke or like a Houston or one of these SEC powers.
They don't have a Cooper Flagg type that just stands out, or some of these other stars that are around in college basketball right now, where it seems to be a collective. which there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, there was a theory out there that the teams that really do well and pull off these surprises were the teams that weren't necessarily centered around a one and doneer so much, but were the teams that had guys like Gonzaga, right, where they have guys 3-4 years, and they have veteran players that are experienced enough to handle whatever pressure comes their way, and also, as Pitino was railing about, be able to handle your share of adversity. Don't just stick your head in the sand and say, "Oh my God, it's not going my way." So, but interesting that it's even a conversation piece here.
Oh no, it's impressive. Look, we thought he'd make them interesting. It's Pitino. It's New York City. People don't talk about New York like they used to because basketball is worldwide, but New York still is a haven for basketball talent. If he can do
I still think the best basketball, at least recreationally, is played there.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't traveled the whole fucking world. I just know that, like, you get players from everywhere now, and that's fine. But he's Pitino. He's able to promote shit. He'll make them interesting. I didn't think he'd do this, and I didn't think he'd do it in 2 years. Like, he has them as a top 10 team. They're a legit top 10 team. I mean, they're throttling fucking teams.
And I don't know that was a consideration going into the season. I tell you what wasn't a consideration going into the season was that Kansas was going to suck.
Yeah, what's with them?
They were the number one team, preseason number one team. Shows you what the experts know, right? I mean, how did nobody see this? They're not even in the top 25 anymore. Bill Self, man, is taking that rug. He's going to fire it at somebody. I've seen that happen.
I know you have.
There was an engineer that was working at WIOD when Neil Rogers was constantly giving this guy shit because he had a fairly obvious hairpiece. And then one day the guy just finally got sick of it, and Rogers is on the air, and this guy walks in there and he says, "Yeah, you want to see this hairpiece?" And fucking took it off his head and fired it in his face. Among the many funny things I saw during my years in radio. Speaking of which, later on Bleacher Brothers, we're going to be talking to a couple of radio legends, one local, one international, as both Phil Hendry, the great Phil Hendry, probably the best I've ever seen do this. And I couldn't, we literally would be peeing in our pants watching this guy do his show. Now, watching a guy do a radio show is no great, event.
No, but the fact, like, okay, so
hysterical. Yeah.
My dad loved Neil, and my dad loved Hendry, and
Hendry was brilliant. Different type altogether.
When he was in his prime, he might have been coming out of his prime already by then, but I was young, so I didn't get either of them. But like he would listen to the show, and I'm like, who are all these fucking people? I'm like, and why are they? I'm like, what is going on? And like he would just be fucking crying. But to then grow up and realize what he was doing, like for you to be able to watch that, it must look like a fucking manic episode. Like the one dude doing like 5 voices and noises and like,
it was amazing.
What I've heard, it was just him. Like
it was just him.
He didn't want anyone. He didn't even want the help. The idea was he was in control of it, and then
he would actually use a telephone to sort of disguise the fact that he was actually calling himself on a show and then interviewing himself as somebody else.
I know,
it was brilliant. It was like when I saw Andy Kaufman, a comedian, Andy Kaufman, who later went on and was widely recognized as one of the brilliant comics of all time. But I used to see him in front of 3 drunks in North Hollywood at Murray Langston's Club, The Showbiz, the unknown comic, and nobody got him. Not even the comedians knew it. They were like, "What the fuck is this?" He used to do that Mighty Mouse thing where he would sort of just stand there and mimic the song. Oh, he was playing a real scratchy version of "Here I Come to Save the Day."
Yeah. They showed him
like, what the hell? How did this guy get on stage, even on an open mic night? And of course, a couple of years later, he was on Taxi, and then people started to see his stand-up act, and it turned out Henry is the radio version, I think, of Andy Kaufman. Nobody knew what he was doing in the very beginning. I'll never forget this. I'll remind him of it because I've told the story many times. Where my buddy Al Winters and I had just gotten new contracts at 2 stations that were in the 3-station cluster there at WIOD. There was an FM station, The Coast, and I think some foreign language station. I'm not even sure if it was Ethiopian, whatever it was. But and IOD was a mainstay. So I had just gotten the sports talk job, and we were outside after the show. His shift ended the same time as mine at 8 o'clock. We go outside. We're outside by the back security door in the parking lot there on 79th Street, and we're smoking a joint in celebration. All of a sudden, like 11 cop cars pull up. I mean, just racing. And I'm thinking, fuck, man, we just got these jobs. Now we're going to get fired for that. Weed wasn't. Now they would just blow by. Remember San Francisco, the cops are passing a joint around as we're asking questions. So I'm thinking, that's just my fucking bad luck, right? Or I'm going to get busted for smoking weed outside the station. Couldn't be any worse. They're going to have no choice but to let me go. I'm finished. The cops blow right by us with like a battering ram to the security door. And the reason that they were there was because supposedly, well, Henry was doing a thing where he was supposedly interviewing Alex Fuentes, the escaped convict, who he was implying had just stopped by the studio. And the cops didn't even realize part of the conversation was that Fuentes' ambition was to somehow clear his name and then go on the celebrity golf tour. He would just keep making the premise get more and more absurd, and then people would be buying it, and they'd call in all angry. What are you talking about, Fuentes? You murdering?
No, that was the joke, right? Was to get people to believe it, and then,
they actually thought he was there.
And the people inside would love it, and then everyone else would lose it. So that was when he knew that he had hit it.
That's when you know you're good.
Fucking lose it. Yeah.
It was right up there. I mean, the furthest I ever got with that kind of thing was the April Fool's prank.
Where it was like your fools with
about Doug Flutie signing with the Dolphins, which I had implied as an April Fool's joke. All right, a lot to talk about. They want to ban the tush push. The Packers are screaming about that. I don't know how you do that. Can you do it? We'll get into that.
Love them too. Someone got hurt. Again, in the playoffs, a Packer got fucking hurt. Players were getting Chris Jones. Chris Jones got hurt. Literally, and I just hate to play because it works and it's fucking annoying. But the fear is you have all this weight pushing on each other.
But how do you eliminate it?
I don't know, but I also feel like it's just
asking quarterback sneakers, essentially, is it not?
Look, that's fine. The people behind pushing, they should eliminate.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Where people push you from behind because you're adding in force. That defenders aren't going to do that, and that I never thought that was allowed. Like you're not allowed to pull a guy forward, right? They're very clear. You can't pull a guy forward.
Well, forward motion.
Exactly. You can push yourself. The people in front of you can push. Someone can't just go and shove that's what they do. They will shove the shit out of
them. They put the hand on the guy's
back.
Should
be dead.
Place should be dead. All right. That makes some sense. So at first I'm looking at it going, this is like having the shift eliminated in baseball. I don't know. Can you really dictate, how a team should play defense? It seems contrary to the principles of the game, doesn't it? If I know a guy can only hit to right field, well, why should I play anybody?
Learn how to fucking hit.
Exactly. There is a way to combat that. It's very simple. Slap on the other side. And also I want to get into, and I don't want to go into all the details of this because they're too complex to really analyze everything, but this Howie Roseman, you talk about a dead man walking. You compare what Howie Roseman did with the Carson Wentz deal and how he turned it into possibly a multiple Super Bowl champion, certainly a long-time Super Bowl contender for as long as they can keep this group together. But the moves that this guy made were so shrewd. Now, yes, they have to work out. But he made multiple moves off of the Carson Wentz trade that ended up landing him the core of the team outside of Jalen Hurts. But all of the offensive weaponry and even Jalen Carter, all of this came about as a result of him trading Carson Wentz to the Colts. And you don't see Chris Greer doing these kind of things. You just don't.
No, he's the guy that takes on
he just wants to spend Stephen Ross's money. Let's go out buy the ingenuity that went into putting this Eagles team together. All benefits of the Carson Wentz deal, and the way that he traded subsequent draft picks and even third-round picks became instrumental in the way he put this team together.
Yeah,
the anatomy of a deal, my friends. I mean, outside of getting Donald Trump, The Art of the Deal, and reading that book. This is worth reading if you're an NFL fan, because if your guy is as lame as ours is here in Miami, you're going to just be astonished when you see all of the different maneuvers that were made and the number of players that were recruited based on one deal that all became instrumental in the Philadelphia Eagles' rise to the top here. 2 out of 3 Super Bowls in the last 3 years, Super Bowl champion, close call. They could have easily had 2 of them. And we're sitting here with our thumb up our ass going, what are we going to do?
Well, they won the other. Remember, he was the guy. Wentz was an MVP candidate. So the most impressive part is they traded to get him. They had him. He was hurt, so they won with Nick Foles, but he was supposed to be the future. So he had already set up that team. He fell off a cliff, which would usually be the end of your run, and that's what you're talking about, which is maybe more impressive. It's not only that he put together a winner. Everything fell apart with the quarterback, which is supposed to set you back 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
Set them back, a year or 2. They had to flesh out Peterson, bring in Sirianni, and it's just come together where they're actually even better because you're saying it's not just about the quarterback. they're a dynastic group where and people get hurt on that team, but you don't know because they just are so deep and so talented because he's done a fucking hell of a job. And that's where people defend Greer. I'm like, dude, it's possible. You see it.
Yes. Well, I mean, he was using pieces that Chris Greer never even would dream about considering as assets. He's trading 5th and 6th round picks and moving up 2 spots in the 4th round to grab a guy. I mean, it was pure genius on the part. You know me. I love front office innovation and ingenuity.
Yes.
And this guy exhibited, I mean, just to 1,000%. Of what Chris Greer will never seems to be able to do. You don't see him making these kind of clever deals. He's made a couple of blockbuster deals to get big name talent, but it's been more of a burial point than it has been, and a little bit of a tease compared to this guy who's got tangible proof that what he was doing and some of the things that seemed relatively insignificant in terms of assets actually became just pure gold. So. And you have to have luck. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the players still have to go out there and acquit themselves.
But it's like the same. What do they talk about? It's preparation and luck meets success. Like luck, we all actually have luck. We just don't realize it because
the residue of design. I think
if you're not fucking prepared, then it doesn't matter how much luck you have. If you don't know what the fuck you're doing, it doesn't matter. Like, and I love our guy Luke, and we'll be there tomorrow. And I appreciate the fans that are just a fan and they find the bright light and they don't want to. Blame the coach or the this or the that. They blame the player. Okay, there's a reason the same organizations win all the fucking time. Okay, there's a reason that same organizations that when they lose guys find a way to fix. And that's why I hone in on Greer so much. Because, yeah, he hits on a pick here or there. But, like, the moves that they praise are the fucking gimmies. Tua falling to you at 5. Okay, duh. You had to draft a guy. And then people still question it because you had Herbert, right? Okay. Tyreek Hill, you gave up the fucking farm for a guy that the team won more without him. Like going and getting, I like Waddle, but you could have had fucking Sewell. Look at the team that's built around
what a
Sewell.
difference that would have made, huh?
Like Jamar Chase, like the Bengals made it to a Super Bowl. Joe Burrow is a guy. If you sucked, you could have had. Like he always, even when he makes good moves, there's 3 that were better at the same fucking time, and that's okay. Like some guys are just average at the job, but you shouldn't be striving for average.
Well, and he's also making isolated moves that make headlines, but unfortunately, they don't necessarily make up a great 53-man roster. All right, we're going to come back with more here. A lot to discuss on the program. I wanted to get into this Yannick Sinner thing a little bit because it surprises me how many tennis players are just trashing this decision that WADA made to make a 3-month suspension deal. It did seem a little soft if they thought that he actually had committed some kind of outrageous, violation of the rules. But since they absolved him of guilt, now is he responsible for what his team does in terms of making an irresponsible move? These things are so difficult to decipher. Intent is always a difficult thing to prove, is it not, Louis? You're at a trial. I mean, how do they prove intent? Do they know what you really meant to do? Unless they just take you at face value and your word. But in this case, I'm amazed at the outrage from top players about Sinner saying that he was receiving favorable treatment. You don't think Novak Djokovic received favorable treatment when they let him back into Australia after the entire country had a firm rule against people entering the country during COVID and they weren't vaccinated? Now they did kick him out of there originally, but they more than were willing to go ahead and relent on that. So we'll get into that a little bit if we have time, and we'll come back with more in a moment. Now that the time, when would we ever qualify something on this show is if we had time.
Yeah, I mean that's every day.
Yeah, I got all day, man. It's 8:41. Play the ponies in style at Champions, the outstanding simulcasting room at beautiful Hialeah Park. Yes, the grand old lady of thoroughbred racing has never been more vibrant, and you can wager on the races from the top tracks around the country while enjoying a cocktail at the Brass Rail Bar or any of the fine food served throughout the facility. If poker is your game, you're covered in style, and you can play all your favorite Vegas-style games, including blackjack, craps, and roulette, in Hialeah Park's sizzling hot casino. Get a player's card when you walk through the door for all kinds of generous amenities, including our favorite, free play, when you come out to the ultimate casino and entertainment destination, Hialeah Park.
These days, we're all looking for comfort anywhere we can find it. Thank goodness for Landlubbers Raw Bar and Grill in Plantation, because they are making sure you are as comfortable as possible. First of all, they're not only open for delivery and pickup. All you have to do is go to landlubbersbarandgrill.com for both pickup and free delivery. You're going to have the best wings in the world. You're going to have a great burger. You're going to have their amazing soups. Again, Landlubbers, Raw Bar and Grill. It's nice and easy. Just go to landlubbersbarandgrill.com for both your pickup and free delivery. Thank goodness for Landlubbers for making you always feel right at home.
Are you looking to buy your first home? Have you been turned down for a loan? Do you need to refinance or get money out of your home? Call Michael Kodsey, CEO of Choice Mortgage. He's been helping the South Florida community get mortgages for 30 years.
Hi, this is Michael Kodsey, CEO of Choice Mortgage. We have the most competitive fixed rates in the market. Call me 24/7, 561-441-2730. And remember, I don't just work banking hours. Make the right choice for your home. Call Choice Mortgage.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't get your question.
You were a coach that you coached all kinds of teams. You had teams that...
Hey, say it in English. Dad, you got it?
Enjoy your trip to work with lots of laughs thanks to Defo and Lubie. Now on the Defo Show.
One of my favorite clips we ever
You and Andy
were able to extract from a show. Say it in English, Dad gummit. Here's a guy that spoke his own language, and he's telling you to say it in English. I understood what you were saying because I speak Lubie. And I would imagine after all, a lot of people listening to you for a long time now that they understand exactly what you're talking about.
Wasn't that bad?
Anyway, good to be back with you, Jeff DeForest, Michael Lubie Lubitz here, and I happen to have our Bleacher Brothers audience now sort of getting used to the idea that did these guys ever say anything of any significance?
Oh, good.
That's the challenge in sports talk and so-called sports talk genres is to actually have something that people can take away and say, that was interesting. I don't know that we've ever gotten quite there yet, but we make every attempt to do so. By the way, Iona, I remembered what it was. It took me a day for it to hit me. Iona, I had a friend, good guy named Doug that used to live in the neighborhood I was in there at the Barefoot Beach Villas. And we still see each other once in a while. And he was familiar with Iona because he was from that area. And he said that, do you know what Iona stands for? IONA. And I said, I don't know. I mean, what the hell? I'm not that familiar with Iona, except Iona used to always be, Marty Glickman was always doing Iona games. And back in the day when he was on the Game of the Week. Marty Glickman, the great Marty Glickman, another Syracuse guy who was a signature broadcaster there. And essentially, for a long time, was looked upon as kind of the Vince Scully of all broadcasters, where everybody looked to Marty Glickman and said, and it's funny, too, because I remember the guy he used to do the high school game of the week on some weenie station in New York. And you're thinking, that's the great Marty Glickman. And he made it sound good. But Idiots on North Avenue was what Iona supposedly stood for. Idiots on North Avenue.
And that's not its official name.
Yeah, so when you're wearing that shirt, Libby, if somebody comes up to you and goes, idiots on North Avenue, don't be offended. It was just a common phrase that I was used in reference to what was going on at Iona. Well, we didn't mention this last night. Your Heat staggering around now under the great, speaking of greatness in the front office, the great Pat Riley. And I'm beginning to believe, and maybe he'll surprise us. I'm not sure. He's 80 years old, Pat Riley.
I mean, he's got to tap out. It's time.
Does somebody else? Is he going to tap out? I don't think. I can't imagine that he's losing any of his capacity. He's not as much of a public figure as he was. He used to frequently do interviews, and he really hasn't been doing any media stuff for, it seems like, forever. He has that State of the Heat press conference at the end of the year, and I want to say the last few years, it's mostly been like, I mean, he's almost coming off like Bobby Knight at a press conference, isn't he? Where he's like angry with everybody.
Yep.
Riley, is that frustration setting in and just manifesting itself on some kind of permanent level with this guy? But I'm stuck with this one, and you would be better equipped to deal with this because you love following NBA offseason and possible transactions much more so than I do. But I don't see where the solution is, Louis. Do you? They've lost 4 out of their last 5. They lose to Atlanta last night. Atlanta was on a 3-game skid. Trae Young only has 11 points in the game.
Yeah.
Had 14 assists, so it wasn't like he was a total waste of time out there. But Still, 11 points, pretty mild. The Heat,
Bam and Hero were useless. I mean, Hero follows up a 40-point game.
even though I think might have been nursing a shoulder injury. So do we?
He's always nursing something. That's the fucking problem with Hero. Like when you brought up yesterday, and you were like, "Oh, I always didn't think he was good enough." No, actually, that was never my problem. My problem is he's always fucking hurt. And last year was the first year he wasn't really hurt. I'm sorry, he was hurt last year. This year had been the first year he wasn't really hurt. He was an all-star caliber player, and now every other game he's missing for the last 3 weeks. He's missing a game here and there, right when they need him. Like that's fucking Hero. That's why it was always hard.
Carrying too much of a load.
Probably, but okay. Like it is what it is. He always wanted it, right? He wanted more. He wanted the start. And then he's doing it. Well, if you want it and you're doing it, why wouldn't we push it on you? Bam has played better, but he's still Bam. He always throws in a fucking game like that, 14. Like you can't do that when your team needs you. Atlanta doesn't even have any real size. Ware has turned into like a legit player. Yeah, he doesn't score like every game, but he's giving you almost double-digit rebounds.
No, he has upside potential.
He plays good defense. He's doing what you could from a rookie that was drafted in the mid to late first round. Like that's amazing. But Jovic is in and out of the lineup. Jaquez is taking a major step backwards.
What happened to my man Jaime Jaquez? I love it.
Ever since he got hurt last year, he's never been able to recover and be the guy we saw the first half of last season.
Wow.
He's been a true, not even a utility guy. He's like sort of an also ran. It's just a lot of like you were right about this. What's annoying is Wiggins is doing exactly what you would have wanted. Like the dude's scoring like 15 to 25 every fucking night.
He was a high scorer for the Heat last night and an abysmal offensive performance.
He plays good defense. Like it was like, okay, if they can keep playing the way they're playing and add in a Wiggins to replace what Butler's not doing, fuck, they could be like a top 5 seed. No, now they don't get Rozier's useless. Like
they're in 9th place now.
Yeah. I mean, they're tied with Atlanta, so they're like the 8-9. But
I think Atlanta moved a game ahead of them.
They have like the same rate. Like Atlanta's 28 and 30.
They might be up on them by 1 game after.
They have the same number of like they're both like 4 under 500, but with a different amount of wins and losses. So,
but it's insignificant. I mean, when you're competing, look, it appears that there's no way they fall out of the 10th spot because the teams that are outside of the playoffs right now, the play-in part of the playoffs, are well back and appear to be destined not to make any kind of ground up in the last 25 games or so. So Miami makes the postseason. They probably make it as a play-in team. They probably make it as a lowerly considered 9th seed in the tournament. You can't imagine that they're going anywhere. They do have a knack for coming through in these early rounds of the postseason and surprising people. We've seen that many years. But where is it going, Lubie? That would be the question. I mean, what is the ultimate solution? There doesn't appear to be something on the horizon that is going to change them from this also-ran status as postseason contenders to a dynamic presence. And look, there's very little differential between, say, the 3rd seed on down to maybe 6 or 7. I think only a couple of games separates those teams that are mid-pack postseason in the Eastern Conference. And as you were saying yesterday, and you're probably right on this, that the other 2 teams that are at the top, Boston and Cleveland, are light years ahead of the rest of the contenders there, including the Miami Heat. But, I mean, what would the solution be? Where do you go from here? They were all hot to trot, supposedly, to get Damian Lillard last year. That was going to solve their problems. It didn't. They weren't able to make the transaction. And even if they had, I don't know that they really would have been all that dynamic because I'm not sure that Lillard is the answer. You mentioned Ware, and if he can develop as a big man, that would be a big plus. Bam Adebayo, as you said, you're starting 2 All-Stars, and you're losing with what, 86 points last night? That's unbelievable.
Well, it's not like the Hawks did any because I didn't watch the game. I didn't even realize they were playing, and I was like, okay, let me see. And it was like late in the game, they're down by 7, and I'm like, okay, so did Trey go off? And Trey had 11. I'm like, okay. And then no one else on the Hawks had done much, but Hero drops back to 11 points. Bam has 14. Rozier,
I'm going to give Hero a little pass on last night's game because he had 40 in like 2 of the last 3 games.
But that's the problem is they don't have room for him to be bad. Like that, it just sucks, but they just don't have room for that. Like Wiggins stepped up, so it's like, okay, the Mitchell kid who had been playing pretty well did nothing. Like everyone did nothing but Wiggins. And it's like, okay, like you're not going to win. Look, the wet dream, because that's what it is at this point. Back in the day, you would have said it's a plan because it used to work out for them. But because the last 5 years has gone the way the last 5 years has gone, the wet dream is the 2026 offseason, right? Anthony Edwards has already mentioned the Heat by name. Anthony Edwards is in a really weird situation where they're actually hanging around because he's so fucking good and they have a lot of hype, but they're not going to win. Minnesota does not attract free agents. They don't.
Who would want to go there? I mean, we were there.
No one.
Was it even like that pleasant for a
you couple
of
days? You want to play Edwards. Like, Edwards is a star. Edwards is going to be a top 5, top 10 player if he's not already in mention.
You're in a place where people eat walleye for dessert. I mean,
no, it's not about place. It's
Miami.
About,
get out of here.
It's like if Wemby, they can figure out the Wemby thing. It's like, why would he want to play for the Spurs? Pop isn't going to be there much longer, but Fox wanted to play with Wemby, right? Like, if you have a star, you can maybe attract guys. But again, Edwards already isn't happy there. The ownership is a fucking disaster. So he's a young enough dude. He's mentioned the Heat. So, okay, wet dream, Anthony Edwards. The backup would be, again, you go back to the Giannis well, right? Like, the Bucks are coming on, but if they lose in the first, second round, that's now 3 years in a row that they've had early round losses. He's now into his 30s.
Which they're destined to do because Doc Rivers is there.
He's their coach, and they have 2 max dudes, super max dudes. So you can't really fill out a roster with that behind them. They're going to always be too good to get a lottery pick. So they're going to be in that place. Is Giannis really going to just do this the rest of his career? He's the one dude that you could see doing the Dirk, right? He has a title, so he's okay being there. But like, he's the Heat's other plan. Okay, but again, are those real plans? Because they've missed out on every star the last 5-6 years. So you can't. That's their plan. What will happen? There'll probably be a lot of this. Like, I really don't know. Like, I like their personnel people, and they've shown the ability to be able to draft guys mid-round and turn them into all-star caliber players. So if that's a skill you have, you're never out of it. I don't know.
He wants to know if that was an Elon Musk salute you just gave, or you're just stretching out a little bit. Oh, okay. All right. Very good.
5. Remember, that's what, if you freeze it, it's like this, but it's this. No, I don't even raise my hand up high. I don't fucking. It wears me out to
They lose 98-86 last night. Now, the real story in the NBA is this. We talked about it. We touched on it briefly. I didn't realize how astounding this whole turnaround was by the Detroit Pistons. Now, we knew they were awful for the last couple of years, and they ended up firing Williams, who they had paid on. Was he on a 10-year, $70 million contract, or was it 7 years at $10 million a year? I think it was 7 years at $10 million a year. Monty Williams, who had come from Phoenix, where he had done very well. Now the Phoenix owner is insane. He's Meshuggah. So that he fired a guy that was coach of the year before. Okay, makes perfect sense. Nobody has cashed. I mean, this is better than the old Neil O'Donnell thing when he was parlaying the free agency and franchise tag into millions of dollars while being a mediocre quarterback at the tail end of what wasn't exactly an overwhelmingly distinct career. But Detroit with J.B. Bickerstaff, how is he not coach of the year this year? J.B. Bickerstaff, are you giving that any consideration, Lubie? Look at this. Detroit now 6th in the Eastern Conference, 32-26. They're 1 game behind, moving up to the 4th spot. They're behind Indiana and Milwaukee, 2 teams that you figured were going to be significant in the Eastern Conference this year. Last year, under Williams, they were 14-68. 14-68. Absolute garbage. At one point during the season last year, they had lost 28 consecutive games. They went from October 30th of 2023 into December of 2024 and lost 28 straight games. They went 0-15 in November, the only team ever to do that, to go winless for a month in the NBA. I believe that's a true stat. And they have had no luck whatsoever. 5 straight years out of the postseason. Cade Cunningham, as we were talking about yesterday, he's emerged as a legitimate frontline star in the NBA. He's not getting the kind of attention that, say, a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is getting, but Alexander has been moving. Gilgeous-Alexander has been emerging for the last couple of years, and he happens to be with a high-flying, high-wire ranked team that's doing very, very well, and he's carrying them and is the league's leading scorer. But Cade Cunningham has not taken much of a backseat to anybody this year in terms of being that compelling guy that can give you the kind of inertia that you need to go ahead and actually be a winning team. But this represents, I mean, imagine it. They won 14 games last year, Lubie. 14 games, 14-68, horrendous, worst record in franchise history, or second worst. And they are sitting there. They're going to make the postseason, and maybe even as the 4th seed.
They're the 6, and they are really close to the 5 and the 4.
Right, one game back.
Looking at their team, I still think their team's in. But Cunningham is now Because look, the question with him was health. Remember, whenever he would play, we would talk to Grant Long. You would look at, like, he would put up numbers. He wouldn't put up these numbers, but he would put up the numbers where you're like, okay, that guy will get there. And then he would miss like a half a season. He would miss a season. He would miss a month. He couldn't stay healthy. He finally last year into this year stayed healthy, and he's turned into a guy that was a number one pick. He's turned into a guy that is an all-around player and a leader. And for a roster that's sort of I don't know who they would beat at the top, but they're right there in that Bucks Pacers range. I don't know if they're in the Knicks range, if just for them. I think those other two teams are with the Knicks, but they don't have enough talent, the Pistons, but they have a number one. And if you have a legit, and their number one to me is more of a number one than the Knicks guy, like, right? Like Cunningham is a star, like you're saying. Cunningham is a guy that can take over a fucking ball game. Is a guy that you put the ball in his hands at the end of a game and wins a game, which is what the Heat are missing and what I don't trust Brunson to do, to be brutally honest. Like, it's what the Celtics have. It's what the Cavs have. It's what the Bucks have. It's what we've seen the Pacers have.
Is what you're saying.
Cunningham
is Rivera out there with the basketball.
Cunningham has become that. The rest of his roster scares me, so I don't see them actually doing any playoff damage. But that was the Thunder 2 years ago, right? Like the Thunder, when Guild SGA started to emerge, the other guys could then fit in around him, and that feels like the Pistons have been thirsting for this, and they may finally have it.
All right. Well, I mean, it's a remarkable story, I think. Because Pistons were very much in the same situation as the 76ers for many years. This is going back before the 76ers just ultimately have bombed out. You talk about laying an egg. But what an horrendous season they're having. They bring in Paul George. It turns out to be a disaster. He lives up to his MO, which was that he wasn't going to be a consistent contributor and he was going to be out of the lineup a lot. Embiid's knees are to the point where you're thinking, why are they even playing the guy?
Never plays.
And I pointed out Tyrese Maxey to you, I think, a couple of seasons ago, Lubie, and you kind of mocked me and said, yeah, he's nothing. And he's turned into a superstar. Which and with a great electrifying game, but Detroit was kind of in that same MO, where year after year they were in a position to draft highly. They had some really bad luck, almost Elgin Baylor type of bad luck at the draft lottery, where they had the worst record by far, but they ended up with the 5th pick.
Yeah, not even the 2nd pick; it would be like the 4th or 5th.
Yeah. I mean, like they're drafting behind teams that were, in the NBA Finals. And,
it was like the Celtics.
You're thinking, well, how are they ever going to get good? And then, as we said, the 1 year where they had the number 1 pick, nobody really thought Cade Cunningham
was good, but not great.
Turn into this. So, a great job, J.B. Bickerstaff. That's my nomination for Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
Is he being talked about in these parameters at all, or do we always just look at the top?
The Pistons finished as a top 4 seed. Bickerstaff, the Pistons, who were again fighting for
last year, Lubie.
Loss records the last like 3 years, and winless, low win total records the last 3 years. Yes, he would win it, and I think he'd win it fucking going away.
We need Grant Long on the show. Is Grant okay?
I mean, I haven't heard back from him. I've tried him repeatedly. I hope he's all right.
All right, we'll get into this center thing maybe a little bit tomorrow because it's interesting to me. The draconian approach of WADA and these international drug police, so to speak, organizations that are. And look, I'm all for it. You don't want to know that somebody was cheating. I hate Barry Bonds to this day for the fact that he destroyed every. He personally didn't do it. Everybody was kind of. I don't know that everybody was doing it, but a lot of people were involved.
There's a lot more people doing it.
Bud Selig probably is the guy that deserves the most blame for that because
it's baseball's fault. They let it happen.
I'll never forget. I loved it, and some images just stay with you as a sports fan. And one of the lasting impressions I'll always have, a couple of them, from those congressional hearings on steroids in baseball, was when Canseco is literally like jabbing a needle into his neck, and Selig is sitting next to him as they're doing this testimony, and the senators are trying to show that they really are concerned about all this, even though they don't give a flying fuck. And Selig's like, I don't know anything about it. And then they allowed Mark McGuire to get away with, well, I'm not here to talk about the past. Well, then what the fuck are you doing here?
No one cares about your restaurant.
Well, I'm trying to help kids stay off of this stuff. Meanwhile, as I said, I never was more shocked, and I still can envision this when I walk by the clubhouse there. I was in the St. Louis Cardinals locker room when McGuire was chasing the home run record of Roger Maris, and it came to what is now Hard Rock Stadium late in the season. And I thought, well, I'll stop in there and see if I can get a couple of clips from McGuire. I was a little more aggressive back then than I would be now. I would passively just say, hey, there's Mark McGuire, and get the fuck out of there and go to my seat. But so I look in the training room, and he had his shirt off, his jersey was off, and his back looked like a topographical map. I have never seen an older guy with zit back like that. Did you ever have zit back? I was very happy I never had zit back.
Curly and I have talked about it. She hates it. Like the skin
Zit
in my
back?
family. We never had like you. I would get a pimple here and there, but I never had like the pimples like that all over my
Right,
body.
where you were getting massive pock marks. So, yeah.
I never had that.
All right. Well, you're lucky. You're fortunate. But
Yeah,
how a guy in his 30s, mid-30s, had zit back
He was fucking.
can only be the byproduct of one thing, and that was he was getting needles the size that Secretariat would get when they were treating him like some hoof disease.
Like Baffert was there.
Yeah, Baffert was knocking Victor Conti out of the way and saying, "Listen, Mark, take this." Well, you think American Pharaoh would have won the Triple Crown without this? The horse had a lot of talent. All right, that's it, Lubie. You got to be kidding me, man. How did we stretch this out into an hour? I mean, the painkillers must be really kicking in here because I barely noticed that the time went by. But here we are. We're at the end of the show, and very happy to have been with you today. Now, Friday, Iron Eagle. I always love that, and he's going to actually make an appearance inside of this program. Going to be about 8:50 on Friday's edition of the show. The great Iron Eagle will be joining us. And, of course, Ian has taken over for Nance in virtually every position that Nance has ever held. It's only a matter of time before he moves into the number one chair. How much longer does Nance go on droning his way through the games with Tony Romo?
I would say a year or two. It feels like Nance is not only because of Ian, but just in reality, he's made a lot of money. He's done a lot of things. It feels like he's on that last few holes. I could see him hanging on to the Masters.
He's on the back nine is what you're saying.
He loves doing the Masters, and Ian has no interest in doing golf. So, and that's the kind of thing where you see Berman still does highlights. Like maybe he does the Masters for a long time, but the rest of it. And then you said working with Romo has got to be a lot.
That's got to be really easy, no? If you're a play-by-play guy,
it's annoying because you're used to. He got into a rhythm with Sims, and then you not only go to Romo, but Romo. It's like people say I yap, like that's Romo, like he just is constantly yapping, like it's got to be annoying, like your rhythm and all that other shit.
They're snapping the ball, Tony. Shut the fuck up.
That's exactly.
There's a rhythm to it. It's not like it's that complicated, especially if you're calling a football game. You play-by-play guy when the play is about to start. Give it up for a second. Let him call a play. There's Barkley off tackle 3 yards, and then you can go right back into your shtick. Well, it's unbelievable. But and Iron Eagle, always I love talking to Iron Eagle. He's one of my favorite guys. All right, later on today, Bleacher Brothers, a little radio special. We'll have the great Phil Hendry. If you're not familiar with Phil, I mean, just in my opinion, my humble opinion, the best I've ever heard do it. Any kind of talk radio in my lifetime, Phil Hendry. You're saying he went off the deep end and was a right-wing conservative for a while?
I'm not saying.
He couldn't be any more anti-Trump at this point.
That's interesting.
Did you look at his Facebook page? I mean, it's all every
post. College, and I just got into radio. He did overnights, or he might not have done overnights, but it aired nationally.
Yes.
And IOD, they had the coast to coast, but before then, because I would run overnights, here and there, just when they were worried about going off air, and he it was like, I don't know if it was Lunatic Fringe because we're here now, but at the time, right? Like
he went Tony Bruno on us.
What we're living through now was never a vision, so he wasn't this obviously, but for the time, from what I knew him to be, he was extremely conservative. And
you would never figure that too if you knew the guy.
That's what I'm saying.
But great performer, and he's going to join us. And we shared some experiences together there in the heyday of WIOD. So locally, I'm sure it'll have a lot of appeal. And then Paul Castronovo is also going to join us. So we have a local legend and an international legend coming up as part of our Conversations program. That's later on today on Bleacher Brothers. That'll get underway about 4 o'clock. And Louis, thank you. Always a pleasure, my friend. We'll talk to you again later on today. And then... You're doing yeoman-like work for me because one of these days you'll have to show me. I'm sure it's very simple how to initiate this thing, so I don't have to bug you all the time, and let you get off the hook there and actually enjoy an afternoon sitting by the pool there and enjoying the company of the lovely Shirley. Does she come out there when you're by the pool, or is she working the whole time to support?
She works all day. I don't go by the pool.
You don't sit by the pool? I mean, you got a swimming pool in your back fucking yard.
Yeah, so look at it.
It's a real luxury. Isn't that amazing? You dream your whole life about having a house with a pool. At least I did. Because I used to blow by when I was on the Long Island Railroad, and you'd blow by those homes in Queens, and they all were pretty much the same. And you're thinking, I don't know that I would want to live there. But they had the above-ground pools, and you were thinking, wow, I'd love to have that luxury.
I like having it. I don't just sit by the pool.
Okay, so it just become one grand expense.
When we have well, that's true. When we have children, it's for kids. It keeps kids really busy and.
But you're a long way off from having a kid that's actually in a pool. I mean, unless you just
my nephews were swimming by 1 year old, so no, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
Actually, like the idea is, you're alive, you have legs. There's a pool.
Yeah, draw them right in, man, right out of the womb.
100%. It's not even a lie. Like my nephews, by 6, 7 years old, I don't know if they were walking yet, and they were fucking swimming. So no.
Same thing with my grandkids. Yeah. They're pretty much fish.
Get the fuck out there.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. It's been a pleasure being with you. For Mike Lubie, I'm Jeff DeForest. Iron Eagle on Friday's show. Tomorrow, Tony Segreto goes old school with us. Brought to you by Texas Roadhouse Restaurants. We'll have the trivia challenge. How long? We should just always have the shows as an honor and a tribute to the great Lenny the Chronic, who we miss so badly.
Yes.
Still hasn't hit me yet. And sorry to hear about the passing. 88 years old. She made a good number.
Yeah.
Roberta Flack, one of my back in the day when I used to listen to a lot of KKGO, the jazz station out of California, Los Angeles, great radio station. But they played a lot of Roberta Flack songs, and so she wasn't really a jazz performer so much, but very, very well respected and well deserving honors that she received during her singing career. And checked out yesterday at the robust age of 88, double eights. All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time as we leave you know that.
The time.
JB Bickerstaff, man. I never would have figured this. It's 9:08.
Let's go to eat a damn snack.
Look what they done to my soul.